Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. Really happy to welcome you to this SERA session. I think this might well be our fourth fringe session so far, and probably one of the most important of several of the debates we're having about putting people at the heart of the transition. And given what we're facing at the moment in terms of the cost of living crisis, the energy crisis, never has it been more important to truly understand how we can use technology and use engagement and actually reach out and support people through this crisis. So I'm really delighted today that we've got an association that represented and has done so much work over the years on fuel poverty. And we also have Dan from Smart Meters, who have sponsored this event, to really talk to us a little bit about how digital and the smart meter possibilities can help us through. And certainly, having worked in a community where people have been hit by metered payments and have smart meters, actually helping them understand the impact of their usage has been really important in controlling some of their stress levels. So I'm really, really delighted to welcome Dan. Just so you know, we're competing with Ed Miliband. So thank you very much for being with us. So Adam Middleton, who is also going to be speaking today, will be joining us as soon as he's allowed off the platform. But if that's okay with you, Dan, we kick off with you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. Thanks very much for coming. I'm chief executive of a company called Smart Energy GB, and I'll explain what that is in a minute. But I suppose I just wanted to start by, acknowledging and calling out the enormous crisis that we're all in, and the incredible amount of stress and pressure that is creating for millions of people. We're very aware of that and trying to do everything that we can, with by no means any kind of silver bullet, but everything we can to help. The government support scheme is obviously welcome, but we're also very conscious that there are millions and millions of people going to be in a lot of trouble, and indeed many already are. We are, we're the public engagement body for the smart meter rollout. So we were put in place by government, but we operate entirely independent of government, and we have a set of duties in relation to promoting to the public the benefits of smart meters, persuading people to get one and persuading people to use it once they have one. We're funded by the energy industry, and we're accountable to energy suppliers, not ultimately to the government. And so far, 52% of the country have a smart meter. We, in addition to having responsibilities for the domestic market, so I guess all of us, we also have responsibilities to maximize installations for small businesses. And our activities, we know, are successful because through statistical analysis, we know that for every installation that occurs, 60% of the contribution to that is from the activities that we deploy, which is mainly marketing and communications. The thing that is probably most visible to most people in that is these adverts that we do with Einstein explaining the benefits of smart meters. But there's a substantial amount of activity that we do, which may be visible to some people some of the time, but not all people all of the time, particularly in relation to customers in vulnerable circumstances, where we have a specific responsibility to ensure that the customers in vulnerable circumstances understand to the full the benefits of smart meters and are not left behind in the smart meter rollout. And those activities have been pretty successful. We work very closely with Adam at NEA, and with organisations like Citizens Advice, who I know are here today, but also people like Carers UK and a wide range of national and local partners who have on-the-ground relationships with customers in vulnerable circumstances. And we know from the take-up of various different groups that through our work and through other people's work, they're not getting left behind in the smart meter rollout. In terms of sort of the benefits for people, there are immediate benefits now. So if you get a smart meter installed, and probably statistically half of you have, you'll get an in-home display that enables you to see your energy usage, both in terms of how much energy used and also how much it's costing, on an almost near real-time basis. And if you observe that and monitor your behavior and change it accordingly, you can save, on the average bill this winter between 50 and 100 pounds. So that obviously is not any kind of silver bullet in the circumstances we're in now, but it is in the category of every bit helps. And, if you set, there's functionality on the IHD to set your budget, and it will indicate to you when you're getting close to your budget. There's also as a report by the NEA has identified, the benefits of, if you're already on prepay. I know prepay is a controversial subject right now, but if you're already on prepay, if you go on a smart meter prepay versus an analog prepay, the advantages are quite significant. And Adam's report, or NEA's report, highlighted those things. You also get available is a accessible IHD, which means that people with various different disabilities, but particularly people who are partially sighted or blind, can get an advantage from a smart meter that isn't available with an analog meter. The usage data from, if you have a smart meter, can help your energy supplier identify whether you're the right sort of person to be put on the public services register, which obviously, if you're not and you are eligible to be, is an advantage to you. And then if you are already on the public services register and there's, for example, an outage in your area, you can be, the existence of your smart meter will tell the DNO that your home is to be prioritized for emergency supply in the event that there's a power cut, for example. And for anybody whose living conditions are absolutely reliant for survival on power, that's incredibly important. Now, in terms of those are sort of the immediate benefits that are available from smart meters. And I think what I'll do is just sort of broadly restrict my comments to the benefits of smart meters, though I dare say the conversation that we will have will go wider than that. The other huge benefit for people is the longer term benefits of the smart, digital, flexible energy system that the industry is trying to put in place, and that we're very much sort of in the middle of, the messy middle of now. And the role that smart meters play in that is very important, because it's supplying a level of near real-time data about demand that simply has not existed before. And that's going to be that is very important for consumers, because smart meters in particular, you can't have a time of use tariff without a smart meter. Time of use tariffs, they're not popular at the moment, but they are, I think, in the future going to be very mainstream. I mean, I already have one, but there's one energy supplier that offers one. And I know that my price of electricity, for example, from about 11 o'clock at night or midnight drops significantly. And I've discovered on my relatively bog standard washing machine and dishwasher that there's a timer function. So I just put it on whenever I want to put it on, but set it to go off in the middle of the night, thereby for those appliances using substantially less energy than I would do, for example, if I was putting them on during the day, and certainly during peak time. Now, that time of use tariffs, where effectively you're trading a bit of convenience to use energy outside of the time when you might normally want to use it for certain things, but offered a much cheaper price because the cost of producing electricity at that time is lower for the system, that's going to become more mainstream. That is obviously, for people that adopt those, that's going to be a huge benefit. There's also a benefit for the system, because with effectively what's known as demand shifting, the balancing of supply and demand within the system is going to be much more efficient, working in a very similar way that SatNav does, using near real-time user data to ensure that the distribution of traffic on the road system is as efficient as possible. Sorry, not speaking close enough to the microphone. And then the other thing, obviously, is that, which many of you I'm sure will know, is the way that smart, flexible digital system allows for the incorporation of renewables, and wind and solar principally, which obviously is going to be essential for us all to reach net zero and stop the world ending. But also in this new goal of reaching energy security, because obviously wind and solar are homegrown, they're abundant, they're cheap. Downside is they're they're intermittent. So having much more information about demand helps you incorporate that evidence much more efficiently into the systems. All that is, the
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I'm Adam Score. I'm the Chief Executive of National Energy Action, which is a fuel poverty charity, England, Wales and Northern Ireland. I'll say some things about smart meters later on. What's the appropriate distance to hold a microphone from? Is it there? Shall I just talk?
Can you hear?
Shall I just talk?
No.
Oh, you need a microphone effect. Never mind. Technophobe kind of still comes through. So look, a couple of things for me. First of all, I'll make comments on smart meters at the end and in questions. For me, they are a fundamental passport technology to low-income households, especially those who have had a prepayment meter imposed on them because of debt, to get something close to a decent deal in this energy market. Without it, they're at the vicissitudes of their opening of their local shop, of their ability to charge a meter in the driving rain and wind, some of which we've had kind of earlier on. And that ability is absolutely fundamental if we're going to have anything close to a decent level of service for people in the most perilous positions in this market. But I'll come back to that in a minute. It's nice to be here this week. The strap line of the conference, the green growth targets, the number of fringe meetings that are bringing together those two issues of cost of living and net zero transition is incredibly heartening. And I've felt positive. It may only last for the 3 days of this conference, but positive for the first time in a long term about the quality of the debates that are going on. But I'm still going to take the liberty of putting down a couple of challenges. Putting people at the heart of the transition, to risk being pedantic and semantic at exactly the same time. Whether you choose to put them there or not, they're there, and they're there at every step of this transition. If they're in an energy efficient home powered by gas, or whether they've been able to invest in the assets on the roof or domestic generation, they are there whether you put them there or not in your policy. So I'm hoping that what we get as the next iteration of policy development from the Labour Party is this recognition of where individuals are along this road, because the many are not the same. I guess human beings are notoriously heterogeneous. They live in lots of different circumstances, and if the depth of your policy investigation does not engage with that and recognize that and address all the iniquities and challenges that people have, you will just have a target. And you will not have that depth of policy that's required. Some of it will be for a new Labour government, some of it will be through regulators, some of it will be through the market innovations, through smarts and other ways. But you've got to find a way of having both the bold, broad vision and having those detailed interventions that will address the multiple barriers and challenges that people face. Because some of the clients that NEA deal with, people usually on the lowest income and the most desperate circumstances, are upfront costs and running costs of new kit, of the hidden charges of rewiring and making their homes efficient, the regulatory barriers about what sort of tariff you're on and whether you're able to switch to the sorts of time of use tariffs that might be available and hold benefits, the lack of advice and awareness of this new emerging, because it's nowhere near a mature market for the energy transitions, about which traders to trust, which technologies to use, what your redress is like, what's the right sizing of it, what sort of return you can expect on investment. There is so much that is absolutely fundamental to have an energy transition that works, that is robust and will not fall over, that is not in place. And the responsibility of Labour, as well as setting out that great pace of a decarbonised power market by 2030, is how you're going to get the market working, how you're going to get consumer protection in place, how you're going to make sure that individuals and communities are aware of the challenges and the opportunities they face. You fail without that. So the many, of course, but the many are not the same, and you need to be able to disaggregate and segment your policies in order to make it work. So that's the curmudgeonly bit. The bigger issue for me in a fuel poverty organisation is there is no route, there is no pathway to net zero that does not pass through the homes of the poor. They're the leakiest homes, they waste the more energy, they're the most affected in terms of their well-being, their health and their incomes than anybody else. The worst first is the priority that we would have. Massive energy efficiency programs, which Labour has supported for a number of years. I don't think it's a risk, but nonetheless, it's important to have it in front of your minds. Do not get sucked in just to the energy supply resilience argument, because it's easier to make. It's easier actually to deliver that kind of zero carbon power market than it is to engage with 28 million households and get them up to a decent level of energy efficiency. You have to do both. There's not much talk. I haven't seen any fringe meetings about the just transition this year. You couldn't move without tripping over a just transition fringe meeting kind of last year. It's really, really important that we understand that the promise, the value, the imperative behind the transition is not just clean heat. It is not just clean power. It is warm homes. It is safe homes. It's the idea that a warm and safe home is the sure start. Let's get that back. The sure start that enables families, older people, young children to have a decent prospect and start in life. Unless you capture and hold at the center, and this is what I think we should mean by putting people at the heart of transition. Unless you hold those values and those promises at the heart of your energy transition story and dynamic, you will lose them, because there are so many moving parts. There are so many trade-offs. There are so many priorities to make within the broad trajectory of the transition that you will lose them unless you hold them tight, unless you value them, and unless instead of just putting consumers or people in the abstract into your policy framework, you start from where they are. Wherever they are in the transition, whatever challenges and obstacles they face, you put them at the heart, and you value progress not just in kilowatt hours generated by solar or wind, important though that is. You start that by sociability in people's homes, education achievement because children can study in the warms, NHS spend because you don't have £1.5 billion spent in England every year, and you don't lose 10,000 people every year to the cost of a cold home. So if you put people at the heart of the transition, what you do is I'm trying to keep talking before Alan turns up. If you put people at the heart of the transition, what you do is you put the interests of human beings and citizens at their heart, their health, their well-being, their mental health, their budgetary fragility. You make it about people, not just injecting people in the transition. If you do that, we've got a chance of winning something like a just transition. If we forget that or let it slide, we fail. So it's vitally important that we do it.
Okay, here. Thanks for that, Adam. And I think what you remind me of, and I had reason to look up the definition again the other day, the previous Labour government referenced sustainable communities. And one of the key issues about sustainable communities was actually working with communities to actually respond to need and requirement today and in the future. And to me, that is one of the critical things that we face, that in talking about a net zero future, we absolutely have to address the needs of the communities and the citizens today. And again, something you've both referred to, I get so racked off with this kind of consumer perspective, when actually what we need is policies that are fit for people, place and purpose. And it's not this general grant-based approach that the government seem to be having. Alan is obviously feeling the need to bask in Ed's glory a little bit longer. So what I'd really like to do is to open up the debate to the floor. And I think, we can expand this into issues around engagement, issues around how smart meters, how tech can actually help us make the full house retrofit stack, because it can. We have trading opportunities, and also how together we can actually work to create those ways of engaging that actually meet people at the point they're at. So, colleagues, from the floor, gentleman in the check shirt there, and then a colleague there. Oh, okay, so we've, okay. No. Sorry. There we go. Right. There you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm Councillor John Savage from Southampton. Alan is actually my MP, but he's also one of my residents in my ward. So when his bins get missed out, he phones me up. I'm really interested in everything. Everything's gone up, but particularly Adam, everything you were saying there about the way we need to tackle the issues for some of the most impoverished communities that we've got. But one of the big problems that I know is to do with people who are in that situation, who have the most energy inefficient houses, are also in the private sector, and the struggle that they have with, I can't get them things sorted out because my landlord's not that keen on that, and everything else, you can imagine. And it isn't just down to some of the technology, but when you've got damp coming down your walls because your guttering should have been replaced about 5 years ago, you've got really, really big problems, and we struggle in the council getting landlords to face up to their real responsibilities and look after the properties and properly maintain them.
Okay, can I take from that colleague there and the gentleman at the back, and then I'll take responses from the panel, and then we'll come back out.
Hi, thank you. I'm Leslie Rudd. I'm Chief Executive of Electrical Safety First. Just a couple of comments and questions, really. First one for Adam. I'd like to say thanks, Adam, for mentioning safety. Come along to various events and presentations about things to do with net zero and the cost of living crisis, and safety rarely gets mentioned. And when you look in policy documents, the only time it seems to get mentioned is when people are talking about hydrogen. So just wanted to say, electricity needs to be safe as well. And that's something that we as a charity are very focused on. And I totally agree with Adam about, you've got to look at where people are now. And one thing I would say is the policy at the moment is that you get free gas safety checks for the vulnerable. there's no free gas electric checks for the vulnerable. And, you know, as we go to net zero and people are not going to have gas in their homes very much longer, we've got to have parity with gas from a safety point of view. And then I guess just something for Dan. You talked about the running appliances at night. And I just wanted to say, in this cost of living crisis, we totally appreciate that people might want to run appliances with a time of use tariff when it's actually more cost effective. But just if you are putting that advice out there, it would be good if you could perhaps also mention safety, because there are more fires at night when people are asleep and things. It's not that your appliances, you know, work less efficiently or worse at night. It's just because people are asleep and things. And so if you are putting that advice out there, we have a lot of advice on our website, but we urge people to make sure they've got working smoke alarms. Also to things like make sure that, you know, if you're running your tumble dryer, make sure you've cleaned the filter, things like that. So just saying, you know, I can understand why people are telling people to do that, but can we just also sort of put a little bit of safety advice out there? Otherwise, we're going to have more people burning in the beds.
Okay, just both some really incredible points pointing to the need for regulation. And finally, just the gentleman at the back there, and then I'll return to the panel.
Dermot McKibben from Beckenham in South East London and a member of the National Leasehold Reform Campaign. I think I'd like to hear what SERA have to say about commonhold and leasehold reform, because if we want to make flats energy efficient, we have to address the issue of ownership of those flats. If you want to have solar panels on your roof on a block of flats, you're going to have to get permission from your freeholder. The government have given freeholders the right to install 2 extra stories on blocks of flats, so they're not going to give up that permission. If you want to have energy pumps in your block of flats, you're going to have to get permission from your freeholder, and they're not going to give that without a price. Common hold is the system in Australia and in America where all leaseholders own a share in a company that owns the freehold, and those residents can jointly decide, you know, how they manage that building. We're not going to get all those flats energy friendly unless we address the ownership issue. Where does SERA stand on that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that point. Adam, would you like to come back first on the challenges of the private rented sector and fuel poverty and the safety issues? I'll then let Dan come back, and then I'll try and address the SERA policy issue.
So very, very quickly, the private renter sector is the most troublesome sector of all, not just in size, but the quality of the housing stock and the inability so far of having effective mechanisms, whether they be sticks, carrots or support to get them done. So, I mean, clearly government's plans around MEES, the minimum energy standards need to be tougher, they need to be harder, but most of all, they need to be enforced. Those enforcement agencies locally to be able to do it, that means you need landlord registers. It's been easier to get grants and support out to fuel poor owner occupiers, and much more successful in the social housing sector, but it is the troublesome sector. And not all landlords are venal, but some of them are, and you need to have those efficient sticks and the effective enforcement to make sure that the rules of the game is you can only rent out an efficient property, and that the tenants should have the right sorts of protection to make sure you're not penalised for that. On the broader energy efficiency issue, we run a project in Preston trying to recover household awful challenges of mold and damp. The reality is that whole house can be very expensive and difficult circumstances. But I go back to the point that if the drive is not just for clean heat, but for warm and safe homes, for all the benefits that has for every human being that inhabits them, it's the issue that we have to be able to tackle, and the role of the state, more than anything else is to ensure those people who cannot afford, who can't invest in an asset with the expectation of a return on investment, for whom that's a foreign language, that it is the role of the state to step in and make sure that people live in decent homes. And that's why the energy efficiency program for the low income and fuel poor, it should focus on those initially, and it should be broad enough to be able to challenge them. And the point about safety is absolutely right. Kind of wiring issues about the quality of homes, but also we should remember going into winter, the dangerous things that people are going to do. They're going to jam stuff in their meters to try and make it work without logging. They are going to use barbecues indoors. They're going to go out and find pallets and break them up and try and set fire to them, even if they haven't got a fireplace. People are going to do things that will cost them their lives, both in air quality and in risk. And so we always need to be aware. And again, it's the mantra. I know it's a stuck record. It is not just an ambition on clean heat. That is incredibly important. It is an ambition for warm and safe homes as a characteristic for every home. You just think about your own homes, places of refuge and comfort and reassurance, not places of dread and danger and early death. You know, that is why the goal is so important for us, and why we have to make sure that the goal of clean heat can be extended to make sure that warm homes, safe homes, sure starts as well.
Thank you, Adam. Very important points. Dan.
Thank you. Safety, incredibly important, and I take your points very on board. I think, you know, as behavior changes through the introduction of different products and services, there's just a whole series of other things that come with that, of which safety is one, which, you know, thank you for stressing that. And we and the industry, you know, do prioritize that. I mean, just by the by, one of the positive side effects of having a smart meter installed is that you get an engineer in your house who can, you know, observe, you know, in extreme cases, some of the things that Adam might have been talking about there. But we've had examples of people who, you know, their property has not been earthed properly, and that the smart meter installer has identified that, but, you know, in the course of their work, and fixed it. So yes, completely take that on board. I mean, I'm neither enough of an expert in the world of private renters, or particularly, you know, is it my place, I think, to sort of comment on, you know, what landlords should or shouldn't be doing outside of their responsibilities in relation to smart meters. But I can see in that work, you know, 24% of the country, according to our research, are private renters. And it's more complicated than we would like it to be to ensure that the maximum number of those homes can get a smart meter. And the reason is because although it is clear in law, it's unclear in the minds of landlords and tenants whose ultimate responsibility it is to allow the installation. In law, it's the tenant, but tenants are often unsure about that, and landlords are often unsure about that. What I have found, though, and we have found in our work, is that through engaging and through extensive sort of education programs, yes, there are always substantial numbers of outliers, but that in fact, landlords have been quite receptive to that information, and ensuring that tenants who want to have a smart meter installed can, but also playing their active part in communicating to tenants that that's something that tenants could do. The other group in all of that we have found to be an important group to communicate with is letting agents. Because, you know, as between tenants and landlords and letting agents, they're all involved in the renting of a property, but the smallest group is letting agents, and they have regular communications with both parties. So we have found that to be effective. But beyond that, I can't really comment on the questions or remarks that have been made.
Okay. Firstly, I think, John, your point is so valid. It reminded me some 25 years ago, I was a director of campaign for Bedsit Rights. My favourite strapline then was that to actually run a poodle parlour, you need a licence, but any EJIC can run a house of multiple occupation. And that remains the problem. There is no statutory requirement upon a landlord to register, to actually conform to any specific standards beyond that. You have to conform to the Housing Act, but there is no actual control mechanism and regulatory process for actually ensuring that the private rented sector is safe. It is an unlicensed market. We have licensing throughout different parts of the country, but if you want to actually ensure that generation rent, that private rented accommodation is safe, secure and warm, then licensing is the best way forward, in my view. Just to really pick up on the colleague's question on leaseholders, I think the leaseholders is a challenging area across the board. One thing that is quite clear with the transition to net zero, making homes warm, making the kind of adaptations and changes that are required, we are going to have to look at new forms of ownership. We're going to have to look at the return to the commons, that actually recognising that there is common ownership and common need to actually have equal say over what happens within an area. How much of that will require primary legislation? How much can be actually done through the creation of additional structures? Some of us have spent time looking at cooperative models where you can actually have some kind of cooperative managing structure. That needs to be worked through, but certainly outside this forum, more than happy to engage with any leaseholders body. Shall we just take one further round? We may see Alan suddenly appear, or we may not, but hopefully colleagues can talk. Gentleman there, and then colleague at the front, and then colleague at the third, fourth row.
Thank you. My name is Alex. I've just moved here from Toronto, Canada. In our province, we have effectively universal smart meter, and time of use enables several hundred megawatts of peak demand reduction on a daily basis. Obviously, a very effective program. I was surprised to learn how little time of use penetration there is in the UK. We're actually now going in a second round of deployment for second generation smart meters to enable locational marginal pricing. Obviously, the UK is quite behind on that regard. How do you account for the delay and intransigence, and how could that be overcome to actually enable some of these very cost-effective solutions for the market?
Thank you. I'm Emma. I'm a councillor in Norwich and the portfolio holder, cabinet member for climate change, including sustainable warmth, energy, etc. It's quite a standard question I ask at these things, but what, if anything, can those of us in this meeting kind of go forward and do action-wise, whether that's a obvious campaign priority against the government, something Labour could be articulating better or going further on, or even kind of individual actions we could be taking as people. Thank you.
Fantastic. The importance of acting now. And finally, the gentleman. Come on, Matt. Gentleman at the back.
I'll beat you then. Hi, thank you. Adam John from Utility Week. Adam, in your bit, you mentioned about the advice piece, and I'd just like to get the panel's thoughts on how best do we tackle the advice challenge, because I'm a journalist who covers this sector every day for the past 4 years, and even I'm confused about the options available for consumers. So do we need a single advice body? Do we need existing organisations to collaborate? And then Dan, a question for yourself. Obviously, we've got 52% of the population on smart meters now. I take it that they are the most receptive people to getting a smart meter. So how is Smart Energy GB tackling the challenge of getting the remaining population on board with the rollout?
Okay, Adam.
I'll try and give each of them a go. I'm sure Dan will answer the question about the rollout, but absolutely right. One of the key things for smart meters, for me, other than their particular benefit and advantages for people with prepayment meters imposed on them, is that one of the challenges of the transition is to make sure the costs and benefits are properly allocated, fairly distributed across it. At the moment, those folk who are in the position with a smart meter and the ability to get those tariffs, the distribution of the costs and the benefits, their flexibility, their choice, their ability to do things that benefit themselves and help balance the system to enable renewables to work more effectively, it's wasted just to have them in a very few niche, hyper-engaged consumers. So whatever the particular answer to why it's taken so long, the acceleration of the smart meter rollout is absolutely fundamental. It is the passport technology to all the behavior change that we think will not only solidify but reinforce and drive forward the possibilities, because they're not certainties, the possibilities of the green growth revolution. That's the first thing. It's a great question. It's a great question about what we should be doing locally. There's so many answers. The one that I'm most concerned with at the moment is, as an advice organization that's over the past year, pandemic and cost of living crisis, been backed into the phone, just dealing one-on-one with people on phones. And you mentioned, Lisa, as well, we've kind of lost that traction with communities in localities and in of interests, because the demand on the phone is so much. We've got to get back to them and make sure that we don't waste the crisis, because the crisis should be that huge focus on the crisis now, the winter that we've got coming. The duration of this energy price crisis has to slingshot us into better sets of community engagements and community leadership around the energy transition. And if we lose that opportunity, we just want taken out and shooting. But it's been really troublesome for those advice organizations like mine at the front line to be able to do that. The only way you do that is working with local authorities and local groups and local communities of interest to make sure we solidify that. The advice challenge is a really serious one. I think because people present themselves and benefit from advice in lots of different circumstances and ways, I don't really think a single body is the answer, but that coherence of messaging, the detail, just getting away from the top tips, the half percenters, and getting through to those advice that make a material difference to people's lives and can be reinforced is crucially important. And again, one of the things that smart meters does, it enables you to understand changes. It legitimizes them. You get the benefit of repetition and revaluation, in order that we can have data-driven kind of personal advice, as well as just the generic "don't fill your kettle up." So I think it's hugely important. I don't think a single body, because that architecture of change just cuts away at the importance of the local and the specific as well. But coherence, leadership from government, but clarity about what actually makes a material difference. And as I said at the beginning, to that awful heterogeneity of human beings, because we're different. We live in different circumstances. Things have different values to us depending on your tenure and your lifestyle and your income and all that sort of stuff. So that top 10 hits doesn't really work. Some of them do. So it needs to be coherent, reinforced, but also personalized to people in particular circumstances.
Thanks. And appreciating we have a journalist in the room, can I just emphasize that at no point in time did SERA suggest that people should be taken out and shot for not conforming to certain things? Yeah. Okay, that was not expressed at a SERA event today. Okay, Dan.
Thanks very much. Alex, can I just ask, in Canada, was smart metering mandated for citizens? Yeah, you see, I think that's probably the big difference with the UK. And I know that, for example, in many states in the US and Australia, for example, nation has been policy. In this country, for various different reasons that, 10 years, more than 10 years old, and certainly predate my history with the smart meter rollout, the decision was taken to make it essentially a voluntary program. And I know that part of that was because in most instances, the meters are inside people's home, as opposed to in other countries where the meters can be outside the home and therefore easier to replace. And part of it was wanting to try and engage people more with energy as a result of it being a voluntary program. But I think that probably has been the biggest reason for the gaps in progress, as it were. I'm really encouraged to hear the stories that you've told just then about the benefits of them and what they liberate in terms of application of time of use tariffs, because I do think that these are ways in which, for many, many people, but also for the planet, they're going to be fundamental to benefiting people and saving the planet. The question about what we can all do, I'm new to the energy industry. This is the first job that I've had in the energy industry. I used to work in the media sector, and I'm really struck by coming into the energy industry how often people say that it's there's this sort of term used in the industry that it's a low interest category, low interest on the part of the public. And I think that that's crazy when you consider how fundamental energy is to everybody's life. And I think that part of that is because there's just not information available in a way that's easily understandable to most members of the public. And you would expect me to use this as an opportunity to, advocate one of the things you can do is to get a smart meter, because it is. But in addition, you know, there are many apps that are available from energy suppliers that do very similar things. And I think the more that you, in the same way that, you know, not everybody has a car, but if you do have a car, the information that is available from your car about your driving and your, you know, the economy of your driving and so on, it helps you to change your behavior in a way that suits you for what you want to achieve in the world. And it's the same with energy at home or in your place of business. And I think the more tools that there are, and the more that people are encouraged to engage with the information that those tools provide, they are going to make a big difference to energy usage and behavior. So I would really encourage that, but inevitably there are many, many things that that people can do in their lifestyles, to do with travel, to do with diet, particularly to favour net zero. And the question about the smart meter rollout. So I think so there's been problems. They're well documented in the smart meter rollout, and in particular, this issue with SMETS 1 meters being rolled out initially. Now the second generation of smart meters, SMETS 2, they're the ones being installed. But with SMETS 1 meters, there was a minority of those where if you switched energy supplier, they stopped working as a smart meter. Now, there's been a sort of major program behind the scenes of those being upgraded. So most people who have a SMETS 1 meter, for which that applied, the network will be automatically upgrading your meter, probably without you realizing it. So that, and together with a number of other technological challenges that have been encountered on the way in what is a, you know, piece of sort of national infrastructure transition heavy lifting, I would say that is all in a state of long-term turnaround. And we're playing our part in that. So our part in that is basically being much more sophisticated about understanding that, you know, we're trying to appeal to everybody in the country, you know, broadly, to understand that lots of different people in lots of different circumstances will respond to different benefits for a smart meter in different ways at different times. And so we now have a much more sophisticated campaign that pushes out a variety of different benefits. Some of them are these sort of national benefits related to net zero and energy security. Many of them are the personal benefits of saving money, saving energy and saving money, and doing those in the right balance for different groups in the population. And, you know, not everybody will see that because they're well targeted. And the effect of all of that is that last year, you know, we segment the people in the country who don't have a smart meter into people who are predisposed to get one, but people who may be more resistant. And the number of people who are resistant last year was reduced by a record amount as a result of this, the sort of sophistication of this, or, you know, what we perceive to be a sophistication of the program that we're running. So, you know, there will always, I think, be people who are naysayers, but we are helping to reduce their number.
Thank you for that. Just on the advice point, I think it goes back to Adam's earlier point about actually understanding the point that people are at, and the same goes about what can we do now. One of the issues is there's a tendency to try and think of, oh, we need to have a new national agency, a new national process. When your daily dilemma is whether to actually feed your kids or heat your home, you don't actually think, oh, I'm going to pop off down to this advice centre, or I'm going to ring Energy Action. Your first thought is, what am I going to do for my children today? And actually what you will do is you will go and find a means of feeding them. You will find a means of getting them to school, and you'll find a means of supporting them. And what we need to do is to be getting the energy advice and the appropriate advice through the channels and the avenues that people access. So certainly one of the areas that we believe that you can give advice effectively through is looking at things like food surplus, batch cooking, starting to talk about the problems of food surplus and actually how through batch cooking, healthier eating, you can actually use a microwave to heat up the food. There are programs that can be developed, but you go to the point where people are accessing the help. The same goes with the consumer side. Again, we believe there's a lot of push for specific agencies to run specific programs. I want PV on my roof. I'm getting PV on my roof. I want to have my house insulated. I'm not going to any specific retrofit works or any retrofit agency. I'm going to the heritage builder in my local area because I know that they will actually be able to support my home. What I need is that builder supported and trained so that actually he will be able to retrofit my house to a quality that I need. So again, it comes back to understanding the different access points that people will have as part of this transition. It's not uniform. Let's not create a uniform one. This is about how people actually shape and use their homes, and the responses have to reflect that. We have 6 more minutes of this session. I fear that Ed has probably taken Alan from us for good. No, that's not Alan coming through the door, so my fears are definitely founded. Are there any final points or challenges or questions colleagues in the audience would like to make? Gentleman there.
Hello, my name's Adam. I'm from Norwich. I work for the Labour MP, Clive Lewis. That's just a bit of interesting biography, really. Hope this doesn't sound too mean, okay? I'm trying not to sound mean when I say this. It seems as though we've had many decades of the kinds of solutions we're advocating, which are based on regulation, advocacy, market signals, behaviour nudges. And here we are, 4 decades on. Surely there has to be an argument now for saying our ambition needs to be we need to move on to something much more like systemic change. So for example, there are solutions like the minimum energy guarantee. So rather than trying to nudge people who are very poor to use less energy, we should basically be providing them with enough energy so they don't have to be nudged in the first place. And in the same way as we have something like a national health service, which when it's not just being a national sickness service, it should be a national wellbeing service. And Adam, you mentioned the wellbeing point here. Maybe there's an argument for something like a national energy service. And then when you start getting into the kind of realms of talking about these kinds of things, you should be looking about how do you control these things, who owns them, and then you're looking at then you're into the zone of talking about democratic ownership and control. And I don't mean in the old style, I mean in the new style where we have things like deliberative assemblies and a proper engagement for people to set the political priorities which drive the actual change that we need. I suppose what I'm really frustrated about is I'm genuinely not getting at any of the people here is that we have been here before. This doesn't seem to match up to what's needed. What we need to do seems to be quite complicated. It seems really urgent. This doesn't really fit. You won't get there doing it like this. We've tried this, doesn't work.
Okay, I asked for a challenge.
No, and it's absolutely right. So we've had bits of it before. So 2010, we stopped insulating homes, just stopped, fell off a cliff. The industry disappeared. What we've been trying to do, so that's the likes of me and Dan and organizations, you have this choice. Well, actually, Dan, you probably don't have a choice, is you either try and make the market mechanisms and the regular work as well as they possibly can to make incremental gains bit by bit, or you step back from them and say, this ain't working, we need an entirely new paradigm with the risk of being voices in the wilderness for some time. But your kind of key point, Adam, is absolutely right, especially for people on the lowest income. It is no point having a voucher that you might apply for. It is no point of having the opportunity of applying for an eco scheme to do one measure in your home. It is fundamentally an issue of diminishing returns. We need to have a multi-billion, decade-worth program to retrofit homes in order that you build energy fragility out of people's lives is the first thing. The market fundamentally fails poor people in the energy market. It fundamentally does. And so we're starting, as a result of the crisis, get back to something that NEA has argued for before I joined it, which is the people, and the greatest, you should have the greatest protection for the most vulnerable. Should be the baseline principle for regulation. So social tariffs which take people out of the market, which guarantee them costs below rate, whether that's through elements of free energy or just a kind of proportionately lower price, is the fundamental kind of building block that you need. And the big thing that I think many people in the fuel poverty movement have been trying to get for is the primacy of people's health. So the strapline for National Energy Action as a fuel poverty organisation isn't your bills should be cheap, is that everybody should be able to afford to live in a warm and safe home. And there's that health and well-being dimension is absolutely fundamental to it. So and this is one of the big challenges for SERA. How can you connect your mission and the things you're interested in with the health of the nation, with public health agendas, with well-being agendas to build early death, cardiovascular conditions, respiratory conditions, sickle cell anemia? How do you build out of people's homes while at the same time driving forward the transition? So a step change is absolutely needed. The prospects of having them all in one place is probably not right, but it's absolutely the right challenge that you should internalize in the Labour Party about what it means to have a transition that is more than just changing the generation of power.
Dan?
Well, I think there's an opportunity. I think that the transition that's going to be required for home heating, to move it off gas, is just going to be fundamental to lots of things. And in order to achieve that successfully, you've got to get much better energy efficiency in people's homes. So whether that's for the benefit of then moving on to a system that's not reliant on gas, or just benefiting you in your home and helping you reduce your bills, the benefit will, it's there as a double benefit. I think that, getting that right, which is going to be a vital sort of partnership probably between government and industry and the public, is a real opportunity, but it is a hill to climb. And, I know that the government is working very hard on what its strategy for this is. And I think that how government and industry work together to ensure that it works for the public is, it's just going to be vital.
Okay, so again, I think what I would say is from a SERA perspective, we have a further 10 different events over the next few days. You will certainly have opportunity to explore the broad range of system change that is going to be required in terms of climate action. And certainly from my political and professional perspective, you cannot invest and sustain cities and communities using the same methods that have failed them so dismally in the past. The gross inequality we have in this country has to be addressed as part of that fair transition. So to me, climate change, action on climate change is absolutely the same side of the different side of the coin to social justice. And we have to find methods that really address fundamental embedded inequality in our country. I would very much like to thank everyone on my panel, Adam, for your really great contributions, Dan, for your really well thought contributions, and indeed your sponsorship and money, which is always welcome. My colleagues on the exec will be reminding me that we are volunteers. We are reliant upon membership fees, sponsorship. Any of you who feel that you may want to sponsor future events or see need for future events, please do get in touch. Those of you who aren't members and would like to become members, there are cards on the floor. And finally, my final role is to thank you all, because without your participation, these sessions would actually be fairly meaningless. So thank you very, very much for coming and joining us.